Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, you remember that great battle, the Battle of Agincourt, 25th of October, 1415. An incredible victory. Henry V's army there, the bowmen of England and Wales, the arrows, the mud, the blood. What a decisive victory. What an incredible fight. Well, would you believe it that 9 years later, there was another English victory? The English army was led by the Duke of Bedford against a joint French and Scottish army, and it was equal to Agincourt, for sure. Welcome to the Battle of Verneuil. Equally as bloody, equally as decisive, fought on the 17th of August, 1424. Let's have a look at what happened at this second Agincourt. Now, the Duke of Bedford, the brother to the deceased Henry V, was in fact the regent to the young Henry VI of England, King Henry VI of England. His other role was that of the constable of the English army in France, and he was pursuing his brother's aims of settling France for the English. Interestingly, he'd been successful. Normandy was settled, well, most of Normandy, and also the Burgundians had been helped to settle northern France and establish a stable government in Paris. Now the Duke of Bedford was free to move out into the rest of France, relieve garrisons where they were needed, or capture more land from the Dauphin's army. Now the Dauphin, before I go any further, just a reminder, the Dauphin was the dispossessed son of the late King of France. So if I was the next in line for the throne and I was pushed aside because of some agreement, I would raise an army too. And indeed, the Dauphinist army, we shall now call it the French. The French, in fact, had a Franco-Scottish army now because of reinforcements from Scotland had bolstered the strength of this Dauphinist army. Gosh, it's a bit confusing, isn't it? So the Franco-Scots army is on the march. They're coming north. Their aim is to relieve garrisons and castles that had been taken or were being laid siege to by the English and gain territory in the north of France. Their target was the castle of Ivry, which was under siege by the English. So the Franco-Scottish army is on the move towards Ivry, and so is the Duke of Bedford with his army. He's marching from Rouen to Evreux, which is not far from Ivry, with the intention of bolstering his army on the siege there so they can actually take the castle at Ivry. Now, once the Franco-Scots learn that the Duke of Bedford's army is not far away, they pull back. In fact, they fall back on the town of Verneuil, which is actually in the hands of the English. But what the Scottish do is they pretend to be English and they bluff their way in, claiming that the English army has been defeated. Oh my God, what we're going to do. They now have possession of Verneuil. Problem they have, though, this Franco-Scottish army, is there is no decision to be made about what they're going to do next. There are arguments breaking out. The Scots want to attack the English army. The French are reluctant because the French are living with the past. They're haunted by Agincourt, Crécy, Poitiers. The Scots had never been fully defeated to such a terrible scale as the French had, so there was so much indecision. Upon hearing that the Franco-Scottish army is now in possession of Verneuil, the Duke of Bedford decides to gather his army together, march on Verneuil and confront the Franco-Scottish army. There will be a battle, and as you can see, I have made a model. The English army numbered between 8,000 and 9,000 men. It was a mixture of knights, men-at-arms, and, of course, our beloved bowmen. They were led by the Duke of Bedford on the English right, and upon the left, the second division there, it was the Earl of Salisbury. They were formed up similar to how the English army was formed up at Agincourt. You had your men-at-arms in the centre and your bowmen up on the flanks. Now, the bowmen had a problem here, hammering in their stakes. First of all, they got to be brought forward from the baggage train, and they got to be hammered in, but the ground was rock hard. So in some places, it would appear that the stakes would fail. The Franco-Scottish army also formed up in two divisions, numbered anything up to, well, between 14 and 16,000 troops, 6,000 of them being Scots. Now, the French army facing the Duke of Bedford, they're over here, was commanded by the Count of Aumale and the Viscount of Narbonne. He was a little bit of a nasty piece of work. The Scots on the other flank faced the Earl of Salisbury. The Scots were commanded by the Earl of Douglas and the Earl of Buchan. On either side of the Franco-Scottish army, you had cavalry. These were mercenary cavalry. The Milanese are on the flank of the Scots. These are on heavily armoured horses. And then on the other side, you have the Castillans on their horses. I've read before that it was these heavily armoured horses that rode the bowmen down. Well, from what I can tell, that's not quite true. Yes, they broke through. On one side, they broke through and went all the way through and out the other side, not causing very much damage, but pushing bowmen off the field. On the other side, they had to go all the way around the bowmen because their arrows were causing damage. Now, the Duke of Bedford had foxed very clever here. He didn't want a repeat of what happened to the baggage train at Agincourt. It was sacked, right? So he formed his baggage train almost like a fortress. It was in almost a square shape, but then he had all of the horses. Don't forget, they had thousands of horses tethered in pairs and tethered together on the outside of the wagons. So nobody could herd them up and carry them away. They would act as a separate set of defences for the baggage train. And those 2,000 bowmen that the Duke of Bedford has placed inside the baggage train is actually a bit of a mobile reserve. This is a bit of a master stroke as far as I'm concerned. Unusual for the 100 Years' War, the Battle of Verneuil was a set-piece battle. The English here and then the Scots and French had been faced up in front of each other. The French were reluctant at first, but they'd been persuaded by the Scots they will face the English. And they were confident with their cavalry on each flank. And what I read about the cavalry, these are mercenaries, Italian and Spanish, and they believed it was beneath them to fight on foot. They'd never faced the arrows of the English. Well, the way the battle opens is the cavalry charge first. The Spanish over yonder there, they are beaten back by the bowmen. They don't have the heavily armoured horses, and they have to ride around the extreme flank of the English army and all the way round the back of the baggage train. This was hundreds of yards wide, this battlefield. If I remember correctly, between 500 and 700 yards wide, which is quite an enormous front. But these Italians here, many of them had heavily armoured horses, and they themselves were heavily armoured. And around this side, the bowmen had been unable to get all of their stakes hammered into the ground, either in time or because of the hard ground, and the cavalry burst through them. Now, I've read that the English lay down or moved out of the way and let the cavalry through. Yes, of course, there will be casualties. But they didn't then turn the flank. They charged straight through and attacked part of the baggage train. This baggage train was enormous. There were thousands of horses. But the Milanese here, they appear to have driven off about 500 bowmen. They were led off the field, these bowmen, by a Captain Jones, who was later brought to book for leading troops off the field. He was hanged, drawn and quartered. So he paid the price he shouldn't have run, because further over in the baggage train, you have the 2,000 reserve archers, and they will play a pivotal role in what happens next. So let's recap on what happened at the opening part of the battle. The cavalry attack down both flanks. Now the French and the Scots were supposed to be in 3 divisions or 3 lines of attack, but they were so eager they bunched up into one massive division. Now the English, their men-at-arms, begin to advance, but then the Scots, eager to get in amongst their hated enemy, the English. The French actually commented on this actual venomous hate that these Scottish leaders had against the English. They surged forward, so instead of it being a cohesive charge, it's actually a ragged attack. So what I've got to do now is I've got to change the model round so that we can see the next phase. What happens after the cavalry gallop off the field? But before I do, the French, when they've raised their flag above Verneuil, they broke the flagpole and they had to secure it with a peg. So I'm going to remove it now for the rest of the filming. Or was it a deliberate mistake by Kev? So what happens now? The cavalry, they've left the field. The cavalry have gone. They're looting the far end of the baggage train. Many of them, however, the Castillon cavalry, the Spanish cavalry, have been driven off with casualties because the bowmen reserve, the 2,000 men, were ready for them. It is the Milanese cavalry who are causing the damage, but they then pursue the 500 bowmen led by Captain Jones, who will pay the price because he's deserted the field. This leaves the English army ready to get on with the job. Now, the French have attacked, and so have the Scots. The French cry is Montjoie Denis, and the Scots is a Douglas, but the English, as one coherent shout, St. George of Bedford, and they advance step by step as a cohesive force, whereas the Scots, the young men, are eager to charge forward and engage against the hated English. So it's a ragged charge. Instead of them hitting a punch right in the middle, it's not. It's a ragged engagement. So all the way down the line, the Scots and then into the French army, instead of them being that cohesive bang, no. Now there is absolute carnage. It's hand-to-hand combat. Now the bowmen, I've got them on the flank here, still having a bit of an archery duel with the Scottish archers. From what I can glean, because there's not a lot written about this battle really, is that the English bowmen outdo the Scottish bowmen. It's not a case of skill and all of that. It's a case of what happened in the battle. But what I can feel is going to happen is the English are going to be drawn round here. But it's what happens on the far flank of the French army under attack from the Duke of Bedford's men. Because what happens now is crucial. The bowmen from the reserve. Don't forget there were 2,000 bowmen left as a body. They have driven off the Spanish cavalrymen of Castillon. They will be short of arrows now, but they've come round the flank of the English to hit the French army on their left flank. Now those bowmen, they will have thrown down their bows, I should imagine, unless there are some still got arrows, and it will be now hammer, axe and dagger. I've now got to move some more figures round to show us the next phase of the battle. So what's happened now is the two armies have clashed together. As I mentioned before, there's not much written about this battle, but from what I can glean is the Scots ran forward, eager to get their hated enemy, the English. The French, not wanting to be left behind, sensing that there was going to be a great victory, because don't forget they outnumbered the English. When they crash together, they are locked in combat. 3/4 of an hour, hand-to-hand combat. But the problem that the Scots and the French will have close up is because their ranks have been broken. They don't have the 3 lines they were originally supposed to have. They have this one great melee. They can't withdraw from the front and be replaced, whereas the English, they've advanced slowly and they are still in their lines, So if a man is knocked down, somebody will step over. But 3/4 of an hour of constant hand-to-hand combat, wow, that is beyond my imagination. In one of the accounts of the day, they said the blood from the dead and the wounded ran in rivulets all over the battlefield. But what's happening now is the Scots are holding their ground. Fierce fighters, my great-grandfather would have been proud of them. But on the other end, the thousands of bowmen that were once in the baggage train have now seen off the cavalry. They're on the battlefield, but they're now turning the flank of the French. The French are under pressure. Now ignore my models where you see all the bowmen still shooting. Their bows would have been down. It's the business of the axe. The grim reaper now is striding across the battlefield. The French eventually will break. But for me to show you that, I need to move my model. So, slight adjustment on the model, the battlefield, just to show the French on their left flank have broke. Now, what I understand happened is men at the rear of the French army could see the friendly town of Verneuil, and they could feel the pressure of this hand-to-hand combat. They could feel the fact that they were going to die. So they broke and run. As soon as the pressure's off, the rest of the French army, some of them fighting backwards, others running for their lives, stream towards Verneuil. But from what I understand is the door may have been closed. And as the French jam up against the ditch, it's a very, very deep ditch. You can see as they're running there, if there's nowhere to go, they are now pursued by Bedford's army. And he pushes them and crushes them up against the town ditch. And many of them fall into the ditch and drowned at the bottom. The rest filter off to the right. And once that's done, it gives Bedford the chance to rally his army, reorganise and fall on the left flank, the left side, the exposed side of the Scottish army. Now, the final stage of the battle was nothing more than slaughter. Once the French had fled from the field, those who survived the ditch, the Duke of Bedford, he turns his army around, reinforced by the thousands of bowmen who had been in the reserve, and they fall upon the exposed left flank and then round to the rear of the Scottish army. Now, the Scotsmen, as brave as ever, fight furiously. But the Earl of Douglas had issued a statement, so legend has it, that he will neither give nor expect any quarter from the English. So the English lay into them, and they begin to chant, "A Clarence, a Clarence, au Claron, au Claron," because the Duke of Clarence, the king's brother, had been slaughtered by these very Scotsmen at the Battle of Beaujeu. But there's another thing happens here. As the slaughter is going on, the Milanese cavalry return to the battlefield. But now there are plenty of Englishmen afield, and they attack the Milanese, killing 60 of them. The Milanese cavalry leave the field. They are actually pursued, but the Duke of Bedford calls off the pursuit to finish on the annihilation of the Scottish army, and it was almost a complete annihilation. After the battle, they counted all of the bodies of the fallen. 7,262 French and Scots were dead. The English casualties numbered around 2,000. But of the 6,000 Scottish soldiers who fought, only 40 survived the battle. That's incredible. Amongst the noblemen who were killed, the Count of Aumale, the Viscount of Narbonne, that's both French commanders, the Earl of Douglas and Buchan, both the Scottish commanders, were killed. Now, shortly after the battle, as you can imagine, the town of Verneuil surrendered to the English. Now, the English were at the height of their power now in the 100 Years' War, for sure. But they still had 3 decades of this 100 Years' War to run, and their success won't last. You see, the tide of war is turning. against the English. Well, I hope you enjoyed that film of ours on the Battle of Verneuil. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support our channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. And before I go, quick shout out to some of my Patreon members. As ever, I've got it written down on a piece of paper. Anthony Cicchino, Alexander Dutart. He's my adopted grandson. So, hey, Alex, how's it going? And then Nicholas Holder. Hey, guys, without your support, I wouldn't be able to make these battles and these models the way I do. So from me and from Julie, thanks a million. Bye for now.